I'm Laura Davis, and my husband Donald Sutherland. We are the farmers here at Long Life Farm. This is just one of our 3 sites within a mile and a half of here. We lease this land from Mark Amato, who owns the land. His father passed away a couple years ago, but we originally leased it from Dick Amato. And so we have about 2 acres here. And this is, we started our farm in February of 2011, so we've just come through 10 years, so I guess we're no longer beginning farmers. Although we sort of still feel like beginning farmers half the time. But I also want to introduce Allison Perry, who works for us. She's a key reason we're a big success on the farm. And so as we're going through, feel free to ask Allison any questions too, because she knows what we're up to. And so today we're going to talk about some of our tools and also our techniques for our no-till bed prep. And so hopefully, you know, when you start farming or start a big garden, oftentimes, you know, you don't really know what you're doing. At least that was the case for us. This was the second career for both of us. And after going through lots of workshops and trying various techniques and various tools, we sort of landed on what we use today. So it does take some trial and error to figure out what works for you in your situation. But feel free to ask questions, as Doug mentioned, and be careful what you wish for. When I left corporate America in 2010, I said I wanted to be a farmer, and my husband said, okay, I'll help you with that. So be careful what you wish for. Did you want to say something before we get going?
Well, it changes. The farming world it's not something that's one personality. It changes every year for us. So it's very dynamic and it's challenging with the weather, but we've networked with a lot of other farmers and trying to be as least impact as we can to the earth. There's an ethic of working with the earth rather than just making it give us something. But you know, no crop, no farm. So you have a problem where it's not really codified farming. You would think so, 10,000 years. There's weeds and there's plants and water and weather, but you still want to do less work, not more. And we were finding that traditional farming was creating more work than we were anticipating, mainly weeds. You were really encouraging weed growth with traditional tilling. So that's one of the real reasons we went to no-till, was because I didn't want to work as hard.
Yeah.
How many years have you been doing no-till?
So we started, we had our last tillage event in 2016, so 2017 season was a no-till season. So we originally bought our BCS, which we're going to demonstrate for you, to till. Now we only use it to raise beds. So it's a big expense unless you're going to use it for a few more things than just raising beds. So we got certified organic in 2013, and then we stopped tilling in 2016. But we started on this farm in 2012 on this farm. We started our first year out with a 1/4 acre and then started calling around to neighbors to see if they would lease to us. And finally we found Mr. Amato that said, it took a little convincing, but he finally agreed to let us lease here. So we're on a year-to-year lease here. So as we get started, I want to talk, there's a lot of different things that we use, tools that we use, and there's a lot of different ways that we prep our beds depending upon what was there to begin with. So keep that in mind as we go around to the various beds. I know it's hard to hear here, so we're going to try and move. We're going to go down this way, and then we're going to go up into the middle area, where it'll be a little bit easier to hear without the traffic. And then we're actually going to put people to work as well. So hopefully you didn't think it was just all easy stuff today, but this is 2 acres. Our other field is a 1/2 acre, and we also have a perennial garden at our home, which everything's within an hour, a mile and a half. We do 75 to 90 shares, farm shares, and we have 2 farmers markets, both Hopkinton and Ashland. Last year our gross sales were $84,000, so it was our biggest year yet. Last year people were ravenous for local fresh food, so it was really a boon year for all of us. We're going to do a few less on purpose this year because it kind of drove us to the edge. And I don't want to be driven to the edge again. So it's amazing how many people you can feed on an acre. That's about 30,000 pounds of veggies, probably not as much as we could do. It just is a matter of how fast you can turn over your beds to plant something new. So that's why you need, young folks like Allison to help. So Don and I are full-time, Allison's full-time. Last year we had 1 other full-time and 1 part-time 3 days a week, and then we have 4 people that work 4 hours a week as volunteers. When we started here, as I mentioned, we were tilling, and I also work for NOFA, and we're teaching all of these people about no-till, and then I thought, well, I have to convert, I have to transition to no-till because I'm part of NOFA and that's what I have to do. So we went cold turkey. We just went, 1 year we put our kale in, we mulched it with shredded leaves, we didn't till it, we just planted right into the bed. We did the same thing with our eggplants and all of our other crops. Some of them we had shredded leaves, some of them not. That first year was really rough because when you transition to no-till, when you're tilling, you have a lot of slugs, tons of slugs, and we had no marketable eggplants that year. They all had little slug holes in them. The kale, we all think that kale is easy to grow. That year it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible because we didn't till it, and we had all these leaves on it. So we've learned a couple of things over the years, and it took about 3 years for our soil to really show some significant improvement. And that is, since this is our 5th year of no-till, what we've seen is more earthworms. Our total exchange capacity, if you get soil tests, there's something called a total exchange capacity, which is really telling about how much minerals your soil can hold on to at any one time. So that increased on our soil reports. It got a lot less stiff or compacted for sure. And so since that time, we've constantly strive to put more and more cover crops on. It's always difficult when you've got cash crops in to make sure to get the cover crops in. So every year we get better and better. We normally use oats and peas, and we start putting them in empty beds starting in mid-August, whatever bed is empty. And so this detritus here that you see, by the way, the fence is not on, so we are going to go under it in a moment. This detritus that you see is from oats and peas last year. These were beautifully covered green beds last fall. It really covered it nicely. You couldn't see any soil, but it does kill over the winter, and then this is what you're left with. Now, when we prepare a bed like this for the spring, we just go through with a hoe and take out whatever, dandelions or other perennial weeds that we see, okay? And all of the beds, this one was covered with cover crop. You can see the detritus. We just leave it there because there's something called a detritus sphere. You have lots of life on the soil that continues to feed on that stuff. So just leave it there. You don't even need to rake it. Do you want to just test out the meadow creature? Show people how it works?
Sure, dear.
So the meadow creature is the device that we use now to aerate our soil. Every single bed gets aerated. You'll see people use this. Go ahead.
Well, I want to say, if you're going to get one of these, you have to get this model. These break if they're made of wood. That's just the way it is. Yeah. I don't think there's only one brand. And this is to lift up and aerate. So you just put down.
You're going to go about a 45-degree angle, You're not going to go all the way to the ground. If you're
And don't kill yourself because you got a lot to do. So it's all a matter of pacing. And then and by the way, our bed widths are the width that you could step over. So it's not by tractor width. These aren't bed widths determined by a tractor. So that's due to Elliot Coleman's book, Curse You, Elliot. But no, that was good advice. It's a bed you could step over. So that's the reason the width is. So you're aerating without harming, and you don't have to overkill yourself. I'm 66 with 2 artificial knees, but I'm very happy Allison does most of this.
So every bed gets aerated this way, at least for the first time that bed's used in the season. We don't always, when we use the bed again, we don't always fork it unless we're going to have carrots there or parsnips or something like that. So this gets done to every single bed. This meadow creature is like butter in our soil. I had other forks that we tried and they just didn't work. This one works great, so I highly recommend it. They have different heights for people of different heights, so it's really great. Once it's all aerated, then we go through and cover the bed with compost. Since we're a certified organic farm, we have to use compost that's been approved for organic use. And Weston Nurseries in Hopkinton has been approved for organic use. They keep the right records, they get inspected, they measure the temperature and so forth. So we actually put, this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 7 gallon each, so 70 gallons of compost on the whole bed. So we don't spend a lot of time, worrying about how it looks. We just grab it and start piling it on, just like this.
And we're still married. It's not easy. No, it's true. We are happy working with each other.
Buy your pockets for Christmas?
Yeah.
Yes,
Bought
dear.
me a wheelbarrow for Christmas. Yes. So we've been using this compost from Weston Nurseries, which is not made with manure. Last year we decided we needed a little bit more biology, so we bought compost that had been approved for organic use from another farm that has cattle and so forth. And so we used that for 1 year. You have to really be careful about manure-based compost because your phosphorus levels can get really high. Less than 150 pounds per acre of phosphorus, you can continue to use your compost. But many farms have way too much phosphorus in their soils.
So yeah, but the other balance is keeping moisture in the soil. And with the rototiller, this would dry out pretty fast and also stimulate weed growth. So that combination made it for a lot of work. And it's a leap of faith, I know, going into no-till, but you'll find your organic matter as it increases because of less tillage will hold the moisture, which will help the ecology Laura's talking about.
Yeah.
No moisture, it has a hard time synergizing all the mystery that happens in the soil.
Yeah. So this bed then would get transplanted. The plants would be transplanted into this as is. If we're going to seed it with the seeder, then we might, rake off the detritus and smooth it out a little bit with the rake. But this is how we would plant a bed with transplants. Okay? So that's one way that we do it. Over here, last winter we planted rye. So this is all the tall grass that you see is rye. And we plant oats and peas from mid-August to about the end of September thereabouts. And then we start planting, last year we started planting with rye and vetch. We were a little worried because people always warn you about rye being hard to get rid of, and especially since we're not tilling. I guess it was a little risky not knowing exactly how we were going to manage it, but I'm happy to say that we're able to kill it without tilling, and I'll show you that as we walk through. This particular 4 beds here did not get mowed yet. This one we're going to try crimping. If you've all seen the crimping devices, Basically what we're going to do is we're going to take a 2x4 that's 36 inches wide. We're going to get some sort of metal flashing on the bottom to make it sharp. And then we're going to attach some rope to the sides that you can manage it with. And then we're going to walk along the bed with the 2x4 and crimp it down with the 2x4. And we're going to leave that in place, and we're going to plant directly into it. Okay, so this is all going to be winter squash, so we're just going to take a trowel, plant our plant into it, and then let it go. It's not quite thick enough to be a complete mulch for the whole season. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But so this bed of rye is not going to be mowed. It's just going to be crimped, and we're going to plant directly into it. Okay. So you guys can all come through here.
Oh, no, I want to mention one other thing is and again, when you start doing more farming, you start looking at the soil more than your crop sometimes. But you don't want to lose topsoil. That's a big problem in the earth right now, and that's another reason to do no-till is to minimize topsoil loss. And so if you had more rain or snow than normal, we would also have gullies in amongst the field and washout prior to going to no-till. We also don't take out the old crop. The old crop is left. The root system is holding the soil over the winter. So we don't, normally you want a nice, it's like cleaning your house. You want a clean, nice bed in between. No, that personality's gone. Your effort is to preserve what you have as best you can by leaving the root systems that are there. And again, that's another leap of faith, because then you do have to maintain it. You'll pull out things as you go along. But we've been living with more things in the soil than taking them out.
Yeah. You'll see a lot of no-till farmers use a lot more compost than what we're using, because it will cover all the weed seeds. But they can be very expensive. I mean, we're already, using almost 80 yards of compost every year. So if we were going to, have an inch covering every bed, it would be just a lot more costly. So we've chosen, most of the weeds we get are perennial now, but we still have weeds, but it's not as big of a problem as it used to be. Okay, so if you can follow me this way.
In addition to your cover crops, do you buy any straw or salt marche?
We had straw for the garlic, and we use lots of mulch. So we use hay mulch. We use hay mulch on almost all of the summer plants. So tomatoes, peppers, winter squash, summer squash, golden berries, all of those. So basically what we do with those plants is, if you look at the peas over here, you'll see that there's some black fabric here. This is what we call our weed guard fabric, and this is sold from the Brookdale Fruit Farm also, the same people that do the irrigation. If anybody needs irrigation, that's a great place to go. This particular weed guard, when we're planting tomatoes or peppers or squash, it almost goes plant to plant. So the part that we're mulching with straw or hay is actually right around the plant and on the top of the bed. And the walkway actually has the fabric there. And that has saved us a huge amount of time and effort of weeding. It's just, this is the same fabric we've started using 6 or 7 years ago. We don't dispose of it, okay? And you'll notice there's no plastic on the farm either, except for the tarps. We used to use plastic mulch, but it's just so hard without a tractor to lay it. I mean, you can do it by hand, but taking it up is worse. It's just awful. Okay.
Are you going right here?
Yeah.
I like your rock garden.
Yeah.
It's there now. We've been using the rocks. They don't get, we buy the bags and we.
Their third year now, but we buy more rock bags every year. This is all rocks inside, not sand, because we have plenty of rocks. Believe it or not, we ran out of rocks the other day. And
I know where you can get some.
Oh boy.
Okay, so this particular bed here, this tarp was here, and this was just like those rye beds over there. So this got mowed and then tarped. So you can see it's dead. It's really dead. We put it on in mid-April, and we took it off the first week in May. Now, the temperatures, obviously, during that time were not hot. You really need about 70 for it to kill well. So that's why it was on for 3 or 4 weeks. The one that we're going to take off has been on for 2 weeks, and so you'll see what that looks like. But this is definitely ready to plant. That rye is not coming back there. The difficult part is that timing-wise, all of our summer crops have to go in about the same time. You know, Memorial Day or a week later, a week later. So getting them all sort of killed that way is a challenge that we have to manage in terms of scheduling. But I am happy to say that if those are flowering and we mow it, we can just plant right into it. So we're going to be covering it up with hay mulch. So it's not going to actually get a lot of light and be able to regrow. So we don't really worry about that too much. So this is a killed bed with the tarp on it. These are really hard to keep down. This is a very windy hill here. Today we have a light breeze, but this spring, if you're from the area, we had 20, 25 mile an hour winds every day. It was crazy. So keeping these down was really a challenge. Sometimes we had, this one went down and took the trellis with it during that heavy wind that we had the other day. So they're a little hard to manage, but once you get down the hang of it, the more rock bags, the better. Okay? Okay. The soil's getting much better with its aggregates, and it stays up like that. But what we find is that when we want to plant, let's just say we had tomatoes here last year, and we want to plant spinach, we got to flatten out the bed because it was a little bit too narrow. And we do that with the bed rake, which I'll show you over there. So these beds have oats and peas that were planted in mid-April. And these beds were going to be without anything but weeds if we didn't put something down in the early spring. So we, up until using rye last year, we always did this with our summer planted beds. We used the oats and peas for a cover crop. These two are really easy to kill. We never tarped them. We just mowed them, planted, and then mulched with hay. And they became, sort of part of the organic matter. But just to keep living plants growing all the time is really important. And at one point, we used to just broadcast all of our cover seed everywhere. Of course, the birds would enjoy themselves and eat it all before it germinated. And then sometimes you didn't get any rain, and it wouldn't germinate, so you waste a lot of money on seed. So we actually use a seeder for these beds, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We just raised these beds this beginning of April. But you can see over there, those beds are not, these three that just got mowed, these beds have not been raised. So Don's going to actually show you how we raise those beds this is pretty much the only thing we use the walk-behind tractor for, is raising beds. But it works really, really well for that purpose. We sometimes get leaf mulch from our landscaper friends who lease the barn. And we had so much the year before that we had left over this spring, so we put it all in between. Wood chips are okay too if they've been sitting for at least a year. It's still going to pull nitrogen out. I would let them sit for a year at least before you use them. piles and just kept piles all over. Yeah. So the PCS is what we call a walk-behind tractor. It comes with a tillage device to begin with. We don't use the tiller anymore, but you have to, when you transport it, it has to have a tiller on it. Otherwise, you can't sort of maneuver it. So what he's going to do, he's going to show you another way that we kill the cover crop besides tarping it. We're going to put more soil on it, and at the same time, we're going to raise these beds. So he's going to come. This tractor you can have all sorts of implements for. You can have a Sully if you don't want to walk. It'll You can do a snowblower. You can do a hay baler. It'll bale one bale of hay. I don't have trouble with the birds, and it germinates even if we don't have water because it's underneath the soil. So I have to use a lot less cover crop seed. We use this for the rye and the vetch also, all in the same go.
How many passes? It looks like half a dozen passes.
Yeah, as many as you can fit together. As many as close as possible that you can get together. Yeah. So this is the my favorite Johnny's bed rake. Does everybody have one? Oh, it's so much. Yeah. Yeah. So you really don't have to bend over when you work this rake. You're kind of going sideways like this and just flattening out the bed, taking off some of the big clumps. Some people try to use it like a garden rake. It doesn't work that way. You really have to get the hang of it. But just standing up straight. You have to attach it. All the attachments attached to the PTO.
Okay.
So it comes usually with a rototiller on it.
Gotcha. Looks like a Honda. Okay, good. Thank
Lots of different attachments. You can buy a flail mower to go on, a small, what they're calling a cultivator, but it's just going on the first inch of the soil to smooth out the bed.
What you're doing with the fork.
What I'm doing with this fork, yeah. Patrick asked a really good question about seeding the beds. So he's asking, well, how do I get that green stuff out of there if I want to seed the bed with this? These beds where we have cover crop are going to be for transplanting into. So any of the bare beds are the ones that I use for seeding carrots, beets, beans, that sort of thing. So I'm not necessarily going to plant seeds into that stubble, okay? This will be tomatoes next week and the next week. So,
So you won't do anything with it. You'll just
well, we're actually gonna tarp it now because I want to show you how to fold up the tarp, and we're going to pull the tarp over here and put it on these beds here, and so you can.
Job to do with a lot of people.
Well, we usually do it with at least two, but usually three. So we can handle it with 3 as long as we don't have 30-mile-an-hour winds.
And it's not wet.
And it doesn't, it's not covered with water, exactly.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
Your line hold is critical if you've done this. If you do that first line wrong, the end of the day looks really funny. It looks like you've been drinking. So, and these are small rocks compared to what we started off with. So you can imagine, it's really hard to hold a line. But overall, this is Elliot Coleman's formula of small European management. We piecemeal our cultivating this way with this tool, as opposed to a tractor coming in and then laying everything down and everything. It's a different personality. This is very much you could apply a piecemeal approach to farming with this implement. As you can see, I didn't cut this up yet. The pan. Forget about me, but other than safety, it's really a wonderful tool. That's a 732. The big issue with any farmer is you can't be everything. You just can't. So you have to have a good mechanic. And I found in Bellingham a dealer.
Belmont.
What is it?
Belmont.
Oh, Belmont. Sorry, Belmont. He does mostly landscaping maintenance machines, but he has this line, and they actually have mechanics that know how to handle everything. So that takes a big load off.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard Don mention that rotary plow was used to break ground. We used to have a 3-acre plot down by the woods there before Dick sold it. And he broke up all of that acreage with just that device. Wasn't easy. So when we moved up here, we actually had a friend come over with their old-fashioned plow and turn it over for us the first time, and then we were able to have the permanent beds after that point. So if you're breaking new ground, sometimes it makes sense to plow away the sod, have them turn it under, 2 or 3 feet, and then you won't have to worry as much about the weeds and the switchgrass and all that other stuff.
How about your, I want to call them perennial pests?
Which ones?
Oh, like Japanese beetles. Like, how are you managing those by not tilling? Like, are you still finding them? Oh, cutworm.
Yeah. So I don't know if any of you listen to John Kempf. He's one of the visionaries of regenerative agriculture. And his whole premise is that once we get the soil to the point where it's very fertile and healthy, our plants will be too, and that the bugs can't digest them. We have definitely seen a decrease in insect pressure. When we first planted peppers 5 years ago, the next morning, I would say 1/3 of them were gone from cutworms. And we had that problem last year in our greenhouse, but this year, knock on wood, they're not eating the cucumbers. But yeah, so cutworms, we haven't had as big of an issue recently. Last year was horrible for flea beetles, much worse than we've ever had before. We just couldn't keep them off anything. So we did have to use a OMRI-approved product made out of pyrethrin, which is on your sheet. Azera is what it's called. And that worked pretty well. And we alternated it with the MPED, which is also a pyrethrin product. The other thing that we have in our armamentarium is dipel, but we haven't had to use it. And I would say probably 2 years we haven't used dipel. That's for anything caterpillar-like, like cabbage lopers, cabbage worms. And the other thing that we will use is a plant skid, which is an animal blood product, especially if I have a groundhog problem. I mean, they have eaten 300 heads in a go, We had 3,000 heads eaten by Canadian geese one year. But just having the metal hoops on the lettuce seems to help. They don't like getting caught up in that. But the plant skid works if you have a groundhog, and I basically put it in a water bucket, and I water the perimeter. I don't put it on the plant. I water the perimeter of the bed, and that really does help. And then the other pest that we have is Colorado potato beetle. We
don't
handpick.
forget the cucumber beetle.
Well, yeah, that's another.
Squash bugs that we got.
Well, no, well, you know,
Less squash bugs than cucumber beetles.
I'm not
cucumber
going to.
beetles are
I'm
bad.
We pray to whoever keeps the bugs away. Pray to them. There's no. They're very resilient. They've been here for how many millions of years? I mean, they're resilient. But we didn't have any aphids last year. That's amazing. No aphids on any of the plants. I mean, I just was wondering what was going on. On the other hand, the cucurbits were hit by the cucumber beetle. And we had no reason or rhyme other than we had a leaf mulch base that might have covered them. But we've lost a lot of...
We're going to try Surround this year for cucumber beetles. So that's a clay type product that you dip the plant or spray on the plant to camouflage it from the bugs. So we're going to see if that works, because last year was pretty bad in terms of, not at this field, but at our other field for cucumber beetles.
You have to be resilient. You really, Mother Nature wins occasionally. Yeah. So you have a diverse portfolio, and then you move on. You have to let it go. Yeah. It happens. It's the nature of the beast, but less so. Laura's right. We've had less stress. And I won't put down plastic anymore, because that's just it's a metropolis for all the voles. Well, we still have voles because they like the hay mulch. Yeah. But we have the red-tailed hawks. And,
yeah, we have some predators there.
But we had a dog. Farming with a dog does help. If you have a dog. Yeah.
We've we've been remineralizing our soil since we began. But what I wasn't doing was worrying about the biology. And so John Kempf again, says biology supersedes the chemistry. So about 4 years ago, we started adding biology. I've always used a seed inoculant, BioCoat Gold, when we seed, to make sure that we had mycorrhiza fungi in our seedlings. I also use the BioCoat Gold now in my transplant drench for that reason, just to give it additional mycorrhiza. We've been focusing on adding good bacteria to our transplant drench. So in each bucket, I had a bucket here somewhere. Each one of our watering buckets, this is a 300 square foot bed, give or take. It's a 4 gallon of water, a cup of Rejuvenate, and a cup of Sea Shield, and a half teaspoon of Spectrum, which is the microbes. And then a half teaspoon of the BioCoat Gold, which is the mycorrhiza fungi. So that gets spread out through the whole bed, and we do that for every planting. We also use that exact same recipe in a backpack sprayer in the fall. So that's what we call our fall primer. Whatever's in the bed, if it's cover crop, if it's Brussels sprouts, if it's bare, it gets sprayed with the fall primer. So what we're trying to do is give the microbes something to do over the winter. Give them a little bit more nutrition and keep them happy. And that was recommended by John Kempf in terms of giving them a chance to make those minerals available for the springtime, right? So they, when they go about their business, they're eating and they're pooping and they're cycling the nutrients. So the microbes are really key. So we're trying to, really focus on our biology of the last 4 years, and it's made a huge amount of difference, I think, to that. So whoever doesn't want to lift rock bags, you're totally fine if you just want to observe. Anybody that wants to help move rock bags, we're going to show you how to fold up that tarp, and we're going to move it down here and cover this section here. Tarps are really fantastic to use. As long as you can keep them down, and as long as you have enough people to handle them. And it really does take, you can get smaller tarps than we have. Haas Tools has some that are only 50 feet long, a little bit more manageable. These are about 120 feet long and about 24 wide. We might even have some that are 32 wide. But it's great to be able to, get rid of the weeds before you plant, and especially when you're seeding with a seeder, to have nothing there to worry about. So we're going to go up here and we're going to move this tarp. Okay, so we talked a little bit about how we weed. We're not going to solarize that over there because it's just not tall enough to worry about. We're just going to plant into it, mulch it with hay, and then put the black fabric in the walking paths if the leaves are not doing their job in the middle.
So are you going to mow it? Just mow it?
If it's only going to be a week before we plant, so it's probably not even going to be tall enough to mow. Yeah.
Quick question. So like on eggplant, when you cut that down after the season's over, that has a really thick stalk. So how are you dealing with that next spring?
It's a good question.
It's not going to decompose.
No, it doesn't. We have a what do you call that, lopper? The big tool, which has got a sharp thing on it. We go about an inch below the soil.
Oh, you do? Okay. That's
And
what I was doing as well.
we've learned that because when we just clipped it off with an inch, it was in the way, but then we plant in between it, so it's not
You're
in our
doing
way.
anything that would be center row, or you're doing it off the center.
Right, because eggplants are planting in 2 rows in the bed,
Okay.
and this year we have our brassicas up there, so they're either 2 or 3 rows. Some of them are 3 rows, like the kohlrabi. So we didn't. I mean, I could feel them here and there, but if I hit one, I just move it a little bit.
If you pull that dead root system up, you'll find earthworms there, but not anywhere else. So what I was doing was making it nice and clean, getting rid of all the earthworms, letting the soil just flush away. So that root system aerates and holds that earthworm. They're happy there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to lose my earthworm.
So we leave the tomatoes, we leave the eggplants, we leave the peppers, we leave everything in the field.
It's a trade-off.
Oh yeah, no, I'd love to leave it. It was figuring out how to work around it.
Yeah, the loppers are great, and we do that for the peppers too.
Okay, great.
And you'll notice this dead part right up here. Those little stubby things are kohlrabis from the fall.
Well, your Brussels sprouts are on the other side.
Yes,
Too, right?
yeah. Yeah. So we'll do the same thing. Eggplants are almost impossible to pull out.
Yeah.
They're
It's like
really,
a corn stalk.
yeah, they're really down there deep.
Using paper pots at all? Paper pot system at all? Or?
No, we're using 128 trays to seed our transplants in,
Oh really?
and kale, lettuce, kohlrabis, some of the flowers, and we put our cucurbits in 50s.
So how How long are you leaving your 128s in the greenhouse? A week or two?
No, they go for 3 to 4 weeks.
And you're getting enough plant establishment in that small of a cell for your like lettuces and stuff? Wow.
Yeah, the lettuce are going 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah, in the tray. And we actually planted some lettuce this week that I was surprised that they came right out of the trays because the plants were so small.
Yeah.
See, when we start all of our seedlings in our basement under lights because it's controlled, and we have, it's in a furnace room. It's 68 to 70 all the time. Because I do have greenhouses at our other fields, but they're not heated. So the germination in that room is so much better. We realized that most of the lettuce that we had in our greenhouse unheated didn't germinate well. It's very spotty. But if it's downstairs, then the 68 to 70, every single one is germinating. So, and plus, if you have a mouse or a chipmunk in the greenhouse, they eat all the seeds. And then you just have to seed them all over again. So we do everything in the basement. And then as soon as it's big enough to go out, it goes out into the greenhouse.
That's what we do too. I wasn't having success even with a 72 cell tray this year with lettuce. It just was so small. But if I put it in a 50, I was getting beautiful plants.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, almost like they were already 2 or 3 weeks old in the ground. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Well, if you have the room.
So funny to learn.
Yeah, if you have the room, certainly you can use larger cells.
Yeah, no, I'd rather use 128. But I was just thinking that.
Well, it depends what kind of lettuce you put it on.
And what your seed starting mix is, right? Is
Yeah,
that a bigger
that's
variable or bigger driver than space for them, perhaps?
Yeah, not for us. Only we use coast of Maine, and we've kind of been. I've had consistency for multiple years with good. It's just this particular year, and maybe it could be the seed.
Yeah.
Coming from because we did buy all new lettuce seed this year. We buy our seed from Johnny's, but we do a variety. We're doing bib, we're doing greens, we're doing romaine, we're doing iceberg, and all of them were consistently the same.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. Yeah, so we just use Fort V. Since you asked, Dave, we use Fort V from Vermont Compost with BioCoat Gold, and that's all that we use. And that has enough nutrition in it for 8 to 10 weeks to stay in a tray. They don't start turning yellow until about week 9 or 10. So that's what we use. Okay. So we talked about the summer plants and how we plant those. We talked about the leaving all the plants in the fall, doing the fall primer. And some people do the spring primer with that same juice. I didn't do that this year just because of time, and my staff hadn't started yet. But the transplant liquid I talked about, it's the same exact recipe that we use for transplanting the bed as well as the fall primer. So we're trying to keep it simple. I talked about some of our favorite tools. We also have a jang seeder, which we use for carrots and beets and all the brassicas that we direct seed. So that we haven't had good success with the jang with beets. But Johnny just started selling a new roller, which we bought, and we've also bought pelleted seed this time, so we've tried it. We've been transplanting all of our beets because we just haven't had good luck. Hoping to change that because it'd be so much easier not to transplant beets. So other favorite tools, the deer fencing. Okay, so this originally came from Amazon in a kit, and they don't sell it anymore. But Zariba is the name of the solar charger, and you can buy all the parts on Amazon if you want to do this fence. Yeah, and one strand, they tell you to bait it to get the deer used to it. We never baited it. They stay out. Sometimes we get a baby deer, roaming around in here because he can almost go into the fence. But otherwise, we haven't had any deer problem, knock on wood. So, yeah, it's really amazing.
So
They
I've
don't
noticed
just
that a
leap
lot of
over
areas
it.
that even close together are very different in deer pressure. And did you know that there were a lot of deer? Would it have been a problem without these?
Yes.
It would have been.
Well, we lost crop.
Our
that year.
landlord, who lives in the house and watches over our crops when he's here, he's a farmer too, so he works at the Vero farm. he said, Laura, you got to get that fence up. There's like 15, 16 deer out here. Yeah, we got a lot of deer. This is all wooded back here, so it's, yeah, we got a lot of deer.
And
so.
their hoof prints are the size of my hand.
Yeah, they're big. Yeah.
That look,
They don't. Isn't that strange? We've been very lucky.
it's electrified.
Yeah. You wonder, you wonder if they've smelled it and got shocked on the nose, because that's, if you're wet, if you're sweaty and you go under it, you can feel it. It's not like a livestock fence by any stretch. It's not that powerful, but you'll feel it. And so if they did touch it with their nose, I'm sure that's what, would have caused them to go away. Yeah. So we're going to start talking a little bit more about the soil, and Carol's going to work on that. The last tool I just wanted to show you, and I don't know if you saw it up top, was we call it the old crank. And it's what we use to roll up all the black fabric at the end of the season.
Like a pool cover.
So we had that, somebody made it for us, and it works awesome. And so we have about 10 rolls of black fabric at the end of the year that all get stored in the garage. And that's reusable from year to year. As I mentioned, we haven't replaced it for almost 6 or 7 years. Sometimes if the wind picks up and they get ripped, we'll have to throw it away. But otherwise, it's very, it lasts a long time, and we use those staples to just staple it down. There they are right there. Yeah, a lot of staples. Any questions before we move on to our soil?
Do you need full spraying at all during the mid-season?
Oh, that's a good question, yes. I have sent crops in for sap analysis to the Advancing Eco-Agriculture, especially when I'm having trouble. I have had trouble growing beets on this soil. They're not sizing up, or the cabbage wasn't sizing up. So I sent cabbage and I sent beets, and then they gave me a recipe for foliar spraying. That was 2 years ago. So the tissue testing is completely different than soil testing. It's not going to correlate. And so the tissue test on the beets was short on boron, iron, and phosphorus. And so they wrote a recipe for me, which I used on the beets every other week. And I got beets. I was so excited. And so I didn't retest beets last year. I just used the same recipe, knowing about my limitations in the soil of boron and the other things. And again, I got beets last year. So 2 years in a row, I'm pretty excited.
Maybe there was an expert here with a lot of knowledge about worm castings and making a foliar spray. I've got a question about foliar sprays from worm castings being a good kind of catch-all, a general application if maybe you don't send anything in, and something you could do easily, just as you could be sure that it's going to be a meaningful result.
Yeah, Monique is our expert on vermicomposting, so I'm going to let her answer that one.
Okay, so the reason to use worm castings is they're full of beneficial microbes. And if they're good worm castings, you'll have a nice balance of bacteria, fungi. And so to make a tea with that is really excellent. And it can also just be an emulsion extraction, where you take a 5-gallon bucket and you put worm castings, stir it up, and that liquid will have the microbes in it. It would be nice to also add some soil if you're making a tea, indigenous soil, so you're adding indigenous microbes. And so the food that you give them, if you have an actual bubbler, which you can do with aquarium bubblers if you want, you would add, for 50 gallons, it would be, so just do the math, for 50-gallon drum, which we used to do in big, just those plastic garbage beds, we would add a cup of liquid kelp, a 1/4 cup of fish hydrolysate. It's really good fungal food. And in fact, the kelp is good fungal and bacterial food. And the third thing is a little bit of humic acid. And you put that in first, and the humic acid will dissipate the chlorine in the water. And it will help bind the nutrients. And then you add, we use worm casting because of the microbes. You can add just compost, whatever you have, and you bubble it for 24 hours. And then all of those microbes get released from the castings, multiplied by the billions with the food source, and that you apply as a foliar spray or as a root drench. You want to, the optimum time is do it for 24 hours and then you can use that tea immediately. So don't let it sit there, it'll go anaerobic and the anaerobic microbes will take over because it's a perfect environment for microbes. So to keep it anaerobic, after it's bubbled, apply it again as a foliar, and to make sure that it's safe, make sure your worm castings are certified organic so that there's no pathogens in those castings. And what we tend to focus on is vegetative input only for the food we give our worms, so that your finished product can be sprayed as a foliar spray in the tea form right up to the day of harvest. There's no pathogens being introduced anywhere along that line.
Great.
Water temperature, are they thermophilic? Can it be
Yeah, so
70
I
degrees
suggest
is fine?
leave it outside and overnight, and what will happen is microbes from different temp times of day will multiply at different times of day, and so
Yeah.
you'll have a more diverse assortment.
The better the stratification, the better your result. Okay.
I think there's worms in our
Tell
future.
them about molasses.
And a bubbler.
Don't.
Oh, don't use molasses. It's a really strong bacterial food, and what happens is the bacteria will multiply, like all of us with too much sugar, will multiply like crazy, and will use up the oxygen, and then it'll go anaerobic. So we used to use molasses, we don't anymore. The kelp is a much better source.
Yeah. So I think, what Monique just said is really one of the main reasons why we want to go no-till, because there's all these little farmers underneath the soil that we don't want to kill by tilling. So we want to have as many bacteria and fungi as possible. Is there a correct ratio of fungi to
Depending on what
bacteria?
you grow. If you want to grow weeds, bacterial dominant soil is best. So till your soil and you will get a lot of weeds. Brassicas can handle more bacteria, and then as you move towards the woodland edge, you could introduce, you want more fungal. So strawberries, for example, want a higher fungal. Row crops, a balance of bacteria, fungi.
1-to-1.
Yeah.
Okay. So we started experimenting with a little kit called the microbiometer, which enables you to take a test of your own soil at home, and it will tell you what the fungal to bacteria ratio is. It'll also give you a total carbon count. So I've just started experimenting with that, trying to correlate it with our friends from who have been through the soil food web training, which is Monique and where's Ruben? There's Ruben, our two soil web graduates, trying to correlate that with Elaine Ingham's soil food web course, where they actually manually calculate the fungal to bacteria ratio and the total active carbon. So that's a lot of fun to play with. Okay, so I think we're going to move on to the soil part of our.
Could I ask you one?
Yes.
Quick question. Just, years ago, I heard a lot about bricks in the refractometer. Is that still in or out, or what's the thinking on bricks measurement of the crop?
Well, I think it's a really great way to test in your own place what the bricks reading is. So yes, it's still a valid measurement. So there's a grid that you can look at
Oh, yeah.
to see, is this tomato a 6 or is it a 12 bricks?
Excellent or good?
Yeah, and it's really measuring the fructose sugar in the juice of the plant, and that correlates to flavor and nutrition, supposedly.
The proof is in your customer coming back saying this tasted better than ever, and that's been our bricks. Just the glowing customer saying this tastes so good. What did you do?
Yeah.
And usually you could say it because you're the farmer, but have the customer base across a wide spectrum. It reaffirms the whole process.
I am a student of the Bionutrient Food Association, where we learn about trying to grow. I think we've been in courses together, haven't we? Growing more nutritious food based upon the minerals in the soil. And I, for the first time, balanced my soil last year. That took a lot of years, but what I was missing was the bacteria. So now, this conversation about compost teas and the microbes and so forth, that's what I'm focusing on now that I've got my soil balanced, because without them, the minerals aren't going to be available. Yeah, so they're really important. Okay.
Kara Roselle, Soil Health Specialist for American Farmland Trust and former Education Director and Soil Health Projects Manager for NOFA Mass. You have a lot of the tools that you need to be able to assess how healthy your soil is, but there's some sort of additional tools you can use using these protocols. So I'm just going to demonstrate a couple of them, and actually one that's not in the protocols that I learned more recently because I've sort of been using more of an NRCS approach more recently. But the NOFA protocols are really nice because they're very detailed and they're very oriented towards folks who just want to kind of take observations of their own soil over time. There's two main ways that you can use these protocols. The first one is to track change over time in your farm or garden. So in that case, you want to pick a spot in your farm or garden that's representative of your soil. So not an area that's really low, not an area that's really high, not an area that does really poorly. Like if your plants are always stunted in that area, don't do your test there because there's something weird about that spot. If we're looking for change over time, you want to choose a representative area that's kind of just a good example of what your farm or garden's generally like. And then you're going to test there every year to see how your management practices are changing the soil. And you want to sort of just test within like 5 feet of that spot. So you can use a GPS to find that spot, or you can make yourself a map using a surveyor's tape and landmarks. Or another way to use these tests is to, and you can do both too, is to do the tests on 2 different areas of your farm. So if you have an area that's not doing well and an area that's doing really well, you can compare them and see what's different about them, right? So let's go ahead and try a couple of these tests. I think what I'm going to demonstrate first is the infiltration test. And generally, because soil type is so, you want to know what your soil type is, which you can find on NRCS or through a texture by feel. But if you look up your property on NRCS's web soil survey, it'll tell you what soil type you have. You can also use an app called, I think it's called Web Soil or Soil. It's Web Soil, which is something I just found out, Soil Web. You can find that in the App Store, and that will tell you, just based on where you are, what your soil type is that you're standing on. So we're standing on a wood, I think it was let's find out, can't remember. A Woodbridge fine sandy loam. Does that sound right? Cool. And that will also give you a GPS location. So what we did earlier when we got here and started these tests was we did the GPS location for the site, and we also measured from the blueberry bushes and from the field edge, basically, just to know where we were, because we want to be able to come back to the site in the future. And like I said, I'm not going to demonstrate all the tests that are in this booklet, but I'm going to start by showing you the infiltration test. So to do this test, we need a few things. We need water. We need an infiltration ring. You should be able to buy one of these online, but I just made a bunch of them using, this is 6-inch sewer pipe, and I used my partner helped me. We used his tool shop, and we just cut it using a chop saw, and then we used a diamond blade angle grinder just to sharpen it to make it go into the soil easily. But you can get steel rings online for this test, but you basically just need to know the volume of water that's going to simulate an inch of rainfall or an inch of water infiltration in your diameter. So for this diameter of 6 inches, we use 444 milliliters of water. But to do the test, first you clear off the vegetation and any kind of residue layer. Make yourself a nice clear spot. So I'm cutting down Laura's rye for her here. Put your infiltration ring and get a piece of hard wood. You need really hard species of wood. A soft wood's just going to shatter. And a mallet. And you bang your ring in. Oops, I'm a little crooked there. About halfway down. And then we're going to see how quickly an inch of water can infiltrate. We're going to take a little bit of plastic so we can time it well. So you can use plastic wrap, or you can, I always have to go past the top because it gets like banged up. Or you can just use like a plastic bread bag opened up, and as long as it covers fully. You know, I would, but it's just because of COVID. And I'm not wearing a mask. We'll just stay. You'll just have to watch me struggle a little bit. I have to do this by myself all the time, so don't worry about it. All right, so cover that with plastic, and then I have prepared a jug that has a line on it with 444 milliliters. This is just a cheap plastic thing, and I was able to use like a more fine measurement glass cylinder to actually figure out how high 444 milliliters is. In the field, you can never get, you know, perfect level surface, so you just do your best. All right. So who wants to do the timer for me?
I'm ready.
Laura's ready. Laura's done this with me so many times.
Tell me when.
All right. So just gonna fill this. Laura, have you done an infiltration test on your?
I have not. No.
Okay. You are today. All right. So let's see what we got. 1, 2, 3, go. So who can tell me what this, why this test would tell us anything about soil health? And why is it important?
Tell you about porosity.
It's talking about porosity, right? It's going to be an indicator of how quickly an inch of water can infiltrate into the soil. What else? Why is this important in terms of how our farms relate to the environment?
What a holding capability.
Yeah, so this soil is pretty moist. It's holding a lot of water already, so this is going to take a little while because of that. But like in terms of thinking about environmental impacts of farming, what is the speed at which water can infiltrate into our soil telling us about how our farm interacts with the environment around us?
The drainage?
The drainage, right. So if you get a really heavy rainstorm, which is what we're going to get more and more of with climate change, if an inch of rainfall can't absorb into the soil very quickly, then that means there's going to be more erosion over land, because the water is going to move over land more easily. And take with it some of the topsoil if we don't have a lot of nice cover crop around to help prevent that overland erosion, right? But because we have lots of cover crop here, we're not too worried about that. But if this was a bare soil farm and the water is taking a while to get into the soil, we might have some sheet erosion or rill erosion without having enough plants around to catch that soil and keep it from.
This is the slowest one I've ever seen you do.
I know. I'm sorry. I didn't want to say anything. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it.
Don't look at it.
It is field moist, but we have been walking on this and kind of crouching on this as we've been doing our testing. So I think that we chose a bad
We're 2
spot.
minutes now.
We should probably have chosen a spot away from where we were actually sitting as we were doing our testing. That's probably why. I'm gonna start over in a more representative spot and see if we do any better.
Right.
No, we were kind of like doing a demonstration of the test earlier privately, so there's a lot of standing on the soil there. Let's try here. Earthworm activity happening in your soil, and we see a lot of that here. So let's try this spot where we weren't standing on the soil a lot.
It sounded like you said mittens, but I know you didn't say
Midden, M-I-D-D-E-N.
This is the first year we haven't had puddles in our
I was going to
field.
ask you about that. So puddles, so you've had ponding in this field. So what was the
Just in the walking paths.
Interesting. What's the land use history here?
Before us, it hadn't been farmed in probably 15 years.
Okay, was it hayed?
They mowed it for hay, yes,
And they took the hay off.
yes.
Okay. So hay land often has a lot of soil health issues. So I was going to ask you about that. So if you have a history of ponding, then we shouldn't be surprised that we're having some infiltration issues, because hay fields often do.
But generally, the walking paths, you know, when we come in the spring, they're full of water.
Yeah.
But this year, of course, we didn't have as much water early on.
So this is probably what we have here is some like historic degradation from hay use, and
Before that,
restoration.
he grew pumpkins and corn.
So it was an annual crops and then hay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With lots of chemicals.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're doing some restoration here. We've got some historic soil health issues. But I can say when we were doing the aggregation test earlier, there's no platy soil structure, which you usually find in hay fields, and there's good granular structure in the top. So, all right, you want to start over?
Yep.
Let's see if we do any better in this spot. Go. And if we don't, then we'll know it's not just that we were standing on that spot, but that this is historic degradation. So,
What would you say the ideal time is that you want it to be?
Everyone I've seen her do is like 30 seconds.
yeah, below 30 seconds is good, but you know, again, Laura's dealing with your farm is not just the land uses that the way you've been managing it, it's the way it was managed for decades before you. And I do have to say, the longest infiltration tests I've seen have been hay fields. So,
The longest test you've ever seen.
I gave up at 45 minutes.
Wow.
Yep.
The next day, all the hay, all the big grasses would really be working that soil.
That's what I would think too, except what happens is that the hay, you've got tractors going on like heavy equipment, and then you're removing the biomass that you're producing. So if you're cutting your hay really low, you're losing a lot of, like when a grass plant has less than half of its leaves cut off, it loses a lot of its root. They die, the root dies back, and then it doesn't regenerate as quickly or as well. And so then on top of that, if you're removing all that biomass that you should be using to build your organic matter, or that the soil would normally be able to build organic matter from, then you're slowly lowering the organic matter in your field. So I just was at a great NRCS training on grazing and animal agriculture. And the guy who's giving that training talked about, he showed two, like a fence row basically, grazing this side. It was more like adaptive grazing or high density grazing, versus hay on the other side of the fence, right? And the topsoil is far deeper on the grazed land, and there was just a lot more compaction and soil health issues on the hayland. So it's not, Laura's dealing with a history of annual crops grown with chemicals, which are highly disturbing, and then haying, and now you're restoring the soil. And you said to me that you had almost no earthworms when you first started, right?
Yep.
But we saw quite a few earthworms when we were just digging around in the soil. And like I said, there was no compaction in terms of soil structure, so that's clearly in an improvement phase. And the topsoil was about 11 inches deep.
Oh, that's good.
So, this is a soil ecosystem in regeneration.
So that's 240, but not much better than the other one.
So really with a fine sandy loam, we're looking for 10 to 20 seconds really for an inch of water ideally, but it's going to be very variable based on recent rainfall, based on what's happened on the particular bed. So it's always good to do a few different ones, like we just did that one, and we're going to try again. And if I were you, I'd try it in a couple different spots on your field.
I would guess that over there it'll go right down.
But I think this is probably a test that you should maybe do occasionally and watch on your field to sort of see what management practices are doing better than others. So that's one test you can do, and you really want to be shooting for below 30 seconds as your goal for soil health.
Right.
Sorry, Laura. I'm sorry. We chose a test that didn't go out that well, but
Yeah, I would not have guessed that just because the rain that we've had seems to not be pooling this year. This year.
So it probably would have been longer in a year than when that was pooling. So you're moving along forward. But I was just at a chestnut farm with a beautiful pasture and the great chestnut trees, and just like an area you'd think would have really excellent infiltration. It was like 35 minutes. So
okay.
it's very site dependent too. Not every test is gonna, you gotta do a range of tests on your site to sort of see what your challenges are and then use them to evaluate your site over time.
Well, this is the top of a hill too, and so you're going to get a lot of desiccation. And does that affect?
So
Or
the
not to the
surface
That's
drying
farming.
will definitely impact that, but because you can see that the soil is kind of nice and moist here, you shouldn't that shouldn't be an issue with this spot.
Yeah, and we haven't had rain since when?
Yeah,
Over a week, probably.
yeah.
But really, really high organic matter does get
Piddly storm.
hydrophobic and can cause really slow. Like, so when you and I did our 3-year study, the 2 farms that had the slowest infiltration, one had very low organic matter and one had over 20% organic matter. So really high organic matter in your surface of your soil can also cause slow infiltration because of hydrophobia on the very surface. That is definitely an
And
impact.
for the spinach and carrots, I had much higher organic matter in the top 2 to 4 inches, more like 11% versus
Interesting.
6
Interesting.
down below.
Right. When you're up in like 10% or over, you can get the soil gets so light that it can become hydrophobic in the very surface of the soil, which will slow infiltration rate. But let's do another. I'm going to talk about structure a little bit and see what we see. So taking a look at your structure is always a good idea regularly. So taking a hole and then taking a slice of your soil. So you can see here the B horizon. We're just starting to see that at about 10, 11 inches. We have, Laura's got very sandy soil. And this is, so you can see the B horizon is basically looks a little bit like playground sand underneath there. And this is all of her beautiful topsoil that she's been working on regenerating. And this here in the top few inches is a beautiful granular structure. You can tell because it kind of falls apart and looks like cottage cheese. We have earthworms hanging out in there. So this is what you're looking for in the top 4 inches is something that kind of breaks apart like cheese curds like that. You see that? And I was just talking to somebody about rototillers, and it's one of the reasons you want to avoid using a typical rototiller is that a rototiller will really smash apart the aggregates at the surface of the soil and break apart your aggregates. And when a lot of the microbes actually need to be protected inside of soil aggregates. Not all of them, but some of the life in the soil need that. So we're really shooting for, with soils, we want to have plenty of pore space and plenty of good soil aggregation, plenty of living roots providing food in the form of carbon or sugars into the soil, and plenty of habitat for organisms of all different sizes, right? So a soil that has lots of good pore space and lots of good aggregation is going to have a greater diversity of soil life. So see how I just broke apart this head of soil, and inside we have some fungi, some hyphae, and we have this wormhole. And a lot of times, so the biopores, one of the things we're looking for when we look at the soil, is we're looking for the presence of biopores, which are earthworm burrows that extend through the soil, and that different microbial life will live in the earthworm burrows because they're creating pore space. A lot of times fungi will form inside of there or grow inside of the biopores, and plant roots will follow them, and types of soil life that just need more space will occupy those biopores. So we were just talking about earthworms earlier. Earthworms were temporarily not native to North America after the glaciers and before European colonization. But now that they're back, they are good ecosystem engineers for agricultural soils because they help to create those lots of great pore space in your soil. So when I was just walking across Laura's field, I was looking at the surface of the soil and seeing how many biopores I can actually see coming up through the soil. You can actually see them when you're walking. They look like little holes, and a lot of times, like I was just saying, you'll see the middens too, which are little piles of roundish bits of soil. The mittens, the earthworm mittens, they look like little lumpy things.
I am smitten with you. No.
So when you're taking your slice of soil, you're looking for all kinds of things. You're looking for the structure to see that you're looking for that good cottage cheese structure. You're looking for the presence of earthworms. You're looking for the presence of biopores. You're looking for fungi and any organisms you could see. Here, I don't know if you can see this. We can pass this around, but this is a little rhizobium node, this little tiny pink node on the vetch root here, which is a good sign of the colonization by beneficial nitrogen-fixing bacteria. We can pass that around. The vetch rhizobium are going to be a lot smaller than the pea rhizobium, which are bigger and lumpier pink nodes, but the vetch ones are smaller.
Is the vetch the white? Is that?
That little pink node, yeah. The little pink node is there.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the geological features of the soil are this is what we have is this playground sand kind of dynamic. So all of this beautiful topsoil is created by the biological activity of the soil. This is all this rich brown colors from the carbon and the life in the soil. Let's see, what else can we do? We'll do a slake test. Hope I have enough water for this.
I got a jug over here, Carol, if you need more.
Thanks. The other thing, one more thing to think about is one thing we did not find here, which is good that we didn't find, is platy structure, which we commonly see on hay fields and a annual vegetable farm that is heavily mechanized. We'll often see a lot of platy soil structure, which is if you take a slice of soil, and it's not going to do it because Laura doesn't have this happening in her soil, but if you were to take the soil and it were to break apart into shelves, which it's not doing, but the shelves are a sign of compressed layers in the soil, and that's called platy structure.
It's like slate form.
It's like slate. It looks kind of like slate, yeah. If you have that in your soil, then you have a compaction problem.
Go get that
The other thing to take a look for in your soil is in your topsoil, if you have massive soil,
Can you go
which
get
is where
that
it
red
just is bricks of soil,
water bucket over there?
or if you have her bee horizon where it's just kind of totally loose-grained and no structure to it, then that's also not good. But we see, like I said, this soil has good structure. The crucial thing is no platy and plenty of granular are some of the key benchmarks we're looking for. Yeah, we'll demonstrate a slake test, and then does anyone want to help count earthworms while we're doing this? Earthworm count is part of the test because we want to know. A good benchmark is we're looking for about, in springtime, 5 to 10 earthworms in a cubic foot of soil.
Did you want to put that on a plastic or something?
So that's our cubic foot of soil, and we just want to put the earthworms into this little cup. So if folks would like to dig through that while I set up our slake test.
And we can put this back in there, right?
You can just put it right back in the hole, yeah. So for a slake test, what you want is a defined amount of water. At NOFA, we're using
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
a half gallon. I hope I have enough. I should, because we didn't use all of this.
Don's bringing some more water
Oh,
over.
great. Yeah, we have enough. And you can make a basket out of hardware cloth. We use 1/8 inch here at NOFA, or the NOFA protocol specify.
Here.
Thank you.
Is this it?
Yeah.
I think we're actually,
More water.
thank you. You want to take a ped of soil or a sample of soil, which is just, I'm going to go over here because we've been kind of walking on this soil a lot. I like to go at about 4 inches deep so that I'm not getting just the... What's that? Oh, I got it. Sorry. And my feet got too hot in my boots.
I think they did. They may have.
Powder first.
Second. Oh, so sorry. That's all right. First.
So we want about a little bit, around a golf ball size of soil. So I'm going to take a little bit more out of here. And you just place it in your basket. And what we're looking for is how much of the how much of the soil just falls through the basket versus how much stays aggregated in the basket after about a minute and then after 5 minutes. And how clear is the water after 5 minutes? So, sure, why not? So here we can see we did lose a fair amount down to the bottom right away. So that's saying, you know, like a really, really good soil structure will lose very little onto the bottom. But the amount of bioglues in the soil, meaning like glomalin, which is a fungal glue, bacterial byproducts, stick the soil together. And biological glues or bioglues are very resistant to water breaking them apart. So that's how the soil particles get glued together. So a soil with lots of biological activity should hold together pretty well and resist the water. It's called aggregate stability. And why would that be important in terms of the environmental impact of farming? The ability of the soil to resist falling apart in water. Exactly, yeah. How long has it been on the timer?
It's right about now.
Okay.
About a minute.
So after about a minute, you just kind of write down in your notes how much of the sample fell through the basket and how clear the water is. And we have if you want to get really fancy, you can get a Secchi tube and look and actually numerically track how cloudy your water was.
There's the rain. I was just wondering.
Oh.
But and then you do it again in 5 minutes to see if there's any change.
But thank you. I'll hold you to that other thing too.
Yeah.
So I have seen everywhere from like totally brown water at this point to totally crystal clear water, and this is, you know, somewhere in between on the clear end of the spectrum. And so a good thing to do on your farm is to do this twice. Once in your vegetable growing area and once in your perennial part of your farm. So the forest edge, the fence row, in a pasture, under your flowering shrubs, whatever, just to give you yourself like a comparison, right? Between like a perennial system that's undisturbed and your sort of more high disturbance area where you grow food. It's just impossible to grow food without disturbing the soil to a certain degree, unless you're growing perennial food. So there's always going to be some degree of disturbance of the soil. So that's this lake test. The slump test.
So
Yep.
through that test, you try to not get any plant roots in it, or you just take whatever you get?
I don't like to yank the plant roots out of the sample because it disturbs it a lot. So when we do this, when the NOFA protocol, the NOFA technicians will do like a field visit, they'll actually put your sample into a yogurt container and then not shake it very much, like just try to like place it in their car, take it home, and then they're probably going to do this lake test at home on the kitchen table to finish the protocols, but they're not going to let that sample like stay in the car overnight because that would kill the bacteria in it. They're going to just take it home and do the sample after having disturbed it as little as possible. So we don't want to like falsely disturb the soil. We're trying to look at what the existing soil condition is like. There is a certain amount of disturbance when you take it out of the soil no matter what. We're trying to minimize that. So a slump test is another quick soil test you can do just with this is not in your protocols, but this is a simple NRCS protocol. Take any kind of sink strainer. Okay. And same thing, you just get a little sample and submerge it. And can we do another 1 minute? Oh, I took too much.
You were on about 4 minutes there.
Okay. So I don't think we're going to see much change. Some soils continue to like drop pieces over the course of the 5 minutes, but this one hasn't really changed.
Oh yeah, there we go. That's a nice sample. Look at that.
Oh, beautiful.
There's something exciting about that?
Yes, pass that around. That's got the the nodules on it.
And the nodules
Oh
are
yeah,
good.
look at that.
They're good because
That's going to give your soil more natural nitrogen from Mother Nature.
wonderful.
That's
So-
bacteria that have a symbiotic relationship with legumes, and they fix nitrogen from the atmosphere on the inside those little nodules.
So if you have 5% organic matter, you're going to have about 10 to 15 pounds of nitrogen from Mother Nature per point.
That's about a minute.
So let's just say you don't have any irrigation. 10 pounds of nitrogen per point would be 50 pounds of nitrogen, which really isn't that much if you're growing tomatoes. You might have to supplement.
So for the slump test, you just soak your soil sample for about a minute in a sink strainer, and then you flip it over like that. And what we're looking for is how much the soil slumps versus holds its shape, and this one's holding its shape quite well. And the water's pretty clear. For a soil with lower organic matter or less biological activity, you'd have cloudier water, and the soil would just kind of bleh. Bleh. That's a technical term. So that's the slump test. So if you don't want to go to the trouble of doing a slake test, you can do a slump test with simple stuff that anyone will have at home. Another really handy test, we'll look at some rhizosheathing, and then we'll look at the penetrometer. And then Laura, are you going to talk about soil tests at all?
Sure.
Okay, great.
There was one question I got for you.
Yeah.
I had an old test that I used to do. I took a mason jar, quarter water, take a cup of your soil, and you stir it up very aggregate, and then you let it settle, and then you can measure the layers of the coarse versus sand versus fine, and you can actually get like a percentage of your soil structure makeup.
Ruben was just talking about that test earlier. We use a different approach, which is in your booklet. There's a texture by feel procedure that you can use to just tell if your soil is like a sandy loam, a clay loam, or whatever. But it doesn't give you the percentages like that, like the test you're describing does, which is great. I think that's an awesome test. It's something I think that NOFA might be considering adding to their protocols.
I got it from a magazine, and it told you to, if you measured the cup with the quarter water, and then you measured the soil levels of the horizons, you could get a percentage of your soil of what your makeup was. So
that's great. Did it tell you organic matter too?
Yeah, the organic.
Was there organic matter at the top, maybe?
Floated, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool.
If you got a lot of clay in that test, call me, because I am eager to make a cob oven. I don't have what it takes on our property.
How many did you say? Was this 1 square foot?
Yeah, that's a cubic foot, yep.
Okay.
You're doing great. I see lots of worms in there. Another thing to look for is rhizosheathing. If you have grass in your garden or on your farm, like a grass cover crop like Laura does, grass is the best one for looking at rhizosheathing. You can take a chunk of your grass and then like a pie tin or a placemat, this placemat that we have here, drop it. Actually, I usually do it from sitting, so I'm going to keep it consistent like that, and see about what percentage came off of the root structure. And that's really good. That's like very little was lost percentage-wise. That means that the grass roots are like very strongly associated with the roots, which is what you want to see in a healthy soil. You can see how the roots are holding on to the aggregates really well. They're very strongly incorporated. You can do it again. See, we lost a little bit more that time, but still holding on pretty strong. And we are going to look to see what our rhizosheath looks like. So the rhizosheathing is the extent to which the roots are covered in soil. So you see here, this is a good example of some nice rhizosheathing where most of the root is not visible because it's covered in soil. So here we can see the root because we've just been dropping it, but where we haven't been dropping it, the root is coated. So this is, you're seeing the rhizosphere here, which is all these, the root is giving out exudates, which are attracting and supporting bacteria, and they're forming a strong association. So this is kind of like your gut, basically. If you have a healthy microbiome, you have lots of organisms in your gut. If you have a healthy rhizosphere, you have a lot of soil sticking to your roots. There's a nice example too right here, like that's really good rhizosheathing right here. So you're looking for that in your plants. Certain plants aren't going to form good rhizosheaths Brassicas usually don't, onion family stuff usually doesn't, but you can see it really nicely on grass type species. Yeah, we'll do the penetrometer and then we'll ask some questions. But there's two types of penetrometers. What these do is they measure hardness in the soil, so they're going to measure the amount of pressure it takes to push the point of the penetrometer into the soil. This is the analog style. It's got just a dial, and then there's a digital one that we've been using at American Farmland Trust. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate the dial one. So there's two on the analog one. You have two dials, one for the large tip and one for the small tip. You want to use the small tip on harder soils and the large tip on softer soils, so you can kind of get a better sense. I'm going to use the larger tip on these soils, and I'm going to go over here where we haven't been walking. And we have each of these lines on the penetrometer is 3 inches. So what we're doing is the NOFA protocol is to actually take do the penetrometer 3 times around your test area and then take an average of what you saw. You can tell when there's a rock because you feel like a grinding sensation versus just compaction. So I'm going to demonstrate once and then people can try it out if you'd like. So it's kind of like driving where you're looking at the rear view mirror and then your odometer and then like the road in front of you and then around and around. So you kind of just have to look and apply consistent pressure at the same time. So I'm seeing 250 at 3 inches, which is high, and then we drop down to 200 at 6 inches. And then we are at about 300 as we go past 9 inches. So that's a little higher than we'd really like to see. And then I'm not able to get the penetrometer in much farther at this point.
Then 9 inches.
So that was 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 12 inches. So that's where the B horizon starts. So that's not surprising. So we have compaction at the B horizon, but not in the topsoil. And your lowest in that one, your lowest PSI was actually at 6 inches. So we'll try it again a little farther away. So this one we had 200 at 3 inches and down to about 190 at 6. And then we're up at 300 already for 9 and we're like 350 at the B horizon. So you should, if you invest in one of these and are doing this in your own garden, you want to just be recording what you're finding, taking an average, and then doing it on an annual basis or more often just to see how it's changing throughout the years. One more. So here we have 200 at 3. I hit a rock, so I have to start over. Yeah, you could hear it, right? It went. Yeah.
Did you find any more?
Yeah, I found
200.
Oh, so we're
200.
at 13.
250.
Yeah, I think we're at 13.
And I'm at the B horizon. So I would have written all that down if this was like a technical test, and I would have averaged that and given it to Laura as her report.
Time of year that you do it?
What's that?
Time of year that you do it?
Same time of year every year if you're going to do annual tests, because it's highly dependent. This instrument's sensitive to moisture, so you want to
so we have
do it in the same time of year. So
13.
if you're doing it in
Oh, that's
July, you're likely to have drier soils, so you want to kind of always do it in July. And if you write down your weather on your workbook, is going to ask you about the weather and the most recent rainfall. You want to be mindful that if you're using this test, the penetrometer to compare, just keep in mind that if you're having a wetter season or if the soil's more moist when you're doing the test, you're going to get a little bit lower readings than you would if it was a dry. Like if you did it the last time it was drier, your readings you should take that into account, because the wetter the soil is, the lower your readings are going to be, which is something that's not perfect about this tool. But it's a great way to just kind of get a sense of where your compaction is in your soil.
And what kind of grid would you use, say, for an acre or something? Would you go to a lot of different places?
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to use these tests are to choose a subset of the tests, so the things that you're concerned about. So here I might be concerned about infiltration and PSI. So I might hone in on those tests and then do them in a zigzag pattern across my field a couple times a year just to see how things are doing, or to compare different management practices or parts of the field where I may have a stronger history of cover crops or whatever it is that I'm paying attention to. Yeah.
So we came up with 13.
13, that's great.
We
So-
can send these guys home?
Yes, you can send them home now. So, Ruben, are you writing that down? 13 earthworms? For Laura's test? Great. Yeah, so any question? I think that's all I'm going to demonstrate for you today. But there are other tests in the booklet that you can do. Any questions about any of those? Pretty self-explanatory, right? It's pretty simple. The booklet has some interpretation information, so when you do these tests at home, you can it'll give you some guidelines or some ways to think about what you're seeing in your garden or your farm.
So I kind of see these tests as physical and sort of indicators of biology.
Yep.
And the three pillars of soil health really are: you have to think about your biology, you have to think about your chemistry, and you have to think about the physical characteristics of the soil. So all three, if you think about, go into making healthy soil, and organic matter sort of affects all of those measurements. We do soil testing every fall, usually mid-August, and we always test about the same time every year. So if you do it in the spring, that's fine too. It's just do it the same time every year. And if you do UMass Amherst, they will give you a recommendation about what you should be amending your soil with. They'll, if you're using UMass Amherst, make sure to check the box organic matter, because they don't automatically include it in their testing. So it's an extra $6, so it's well worth having that information. So that's, 18 plus 6 is 24 for UMass Amherst. I usually send my soil test to Logan Lab because I am a student of the Albrecht model, which he was a scientist in the early 20s and 30s in Missouri. And his research surrounded the perfect soil for growing healthy food. And healthy food makes healthy animals and healthy humans. So I use Logan Labs, and we do, NOFA has a service where you can get a Logan Labs test and then have somebody from NOFA analyze your soil report and tell you what you should be adding to your soil. If you don't have to do it every year, but definitely do it once as a baseline, and then every couple of years or every 3 years to really see what you shouldn't be adding stuff that the soil doesn't need. You just really want to address the limiting factors in the minerals that you have in the soil. So oftentimes people just say, oh, I compost every year, that's all I do. Compost is a great thing, but it can be too much of a good thing. So just know that if you haven't had a soil test, you should do one as a baseline just to see what your limitations are. So other questions that people may have about the farm, about soil tests, about the soil, about no-till. Yes?
You're saying you can add too much compost to your soil?
Yes, especially if it's manure-based compost. You could have very high phosphorus levels, and very high phosphorus levels can impact the uptake by the plant of other minerals as well.
What about if it's like leaf compost or something like that?
Usually vegetative compost is not going to give you an excess in phosphorus, but you may need more calcium, and the only way you're going to know that is by doing a soil test. So leaves are a great source of potassium and some calcium, but you would definitely want to know if you should be adding more calcium or more potassium to the soil to make sure that you have enough for your plants.
So when you were doing soil testing across the state, and I know you did a lot of testing, what can you say about really the best readings you got with your penetrometer? I have a lot of compaction, and I don't really know how deep I should be looking. I'm always hitting some kind of compaction if I go down 3 feet.
Oh, 3 feet. Do you have a
Always
penetrometer that goes 3 feet?
No, almost when this is bottoming out, what's that, 2.5 feet, I think.
Okay, yeah.
But where do you worry about it, and what's really good, and how does that really correlate with the crops that are coming off the land?
So most crop plants that are grown for agricultural crops can't penetrate with their roots past 300 psi, and about 80% of their growth is restricted at 250. So if you think about the soil, like when you're hitting 300, the depth at which you're consistently hitting 300 through a range of soil moisture conditions, knowing that the tool is sensitive, is about how deep you're working with in terms of topsoil. So if you're consistently finding, like most mechanized crop farms are, that you have a layer of 300 psi at 6 to 9 inches, which is, in my travels, mechanized organic farms have had to till a lot because they don't have herbicide as an option for eliminating cover crops, so there's a lot more tillage and soil disturbance. Most of those farms are having 6 to 9 inches if they're not no-till compaction. So they're in effect limiting their root zone to 6 to 9 inches, depending on where that compaction is, right? Most of the no-till farms I've looked at, depending on how long they've been in no-till and what the land use history is, how bad their historic compaction was, have had much more of a deep zone in which the plants can actually utilize as their growing medium, right? That said, biodrilling cover crops can overcome those higher PSI and can help to break it up. And then you have some tools at your disposal, like the meadow creature that Don demonstrated, which is, clearly you guys came into the situation with a lot of historic degradation from previous land use. So that meadow creature has clearly been effective in breaking up that historic compaction. And then if you follow something at a larger scale, it would be like you'd want to use a subsoiler, which is like a big deep blade on your tractor to just rip that open. You want to follow your deep soil loosening with a biodrilling cover crop, like a tillage radish. Other things that actually have a pretty good taproot are, like, if you can handle the perennial nature of it, mammoth red clover. We know from our colleague Noah Kellerman is his favorite taprooted cover crop species. He says it really makes the soil really nice. But just sort of look up cover crops with taproots, aggressive taproots, and you'll get a lot of options for time of year and whether you want them to overwinter. And I would generally recommend following those with applying those after some kind of a deeper soil mechanical loosening, like a meadow creature or a subsoiling event. And that'll help you open that up. So the mechanical work you do will be followed by the root system, which will continue that work, if that makes sense. Mammoth red clover, or medium red clover. Mammoth red clover is just a bigger variety of medium red clover, but the red clover, so not crimson clover, which is winter kills, but it's a perennial cover crop, so you'll need to use something like a tarp or a flail mower to terminate it. But that, and generally a mix is better, so you always want a mix of clover, grass, and then any other species you can get in there. So for like an August seeded cover crop, having tillage radish in there, which will winter kill, but will do a lot of good if you get it in by August. Some kind of a grass, some kind of a legume. So if you're going for, overwinter, you can do rye and vetch like Laura's doing. You might also want to get something taprooted in there, like the red clover or the tillage radish, which won't last through the winter, but the red clover will. If you're going for something winter kill, you would use cold sensitive crops, cover crops. But cover cropping is really important to getting that soil structure improved in a number of ways, but that biodrilling action will really help you with your compaction. But yeah, like I said, some of the higher levels of compaction I found are on hayfields and on really heavily tilled soils.
I've heard say to combine mechanical with the biological, and I think I've tried tillage radish before that would grow out of the ground instead of going in the ground, just because the ground's so hard.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I'm running this little experiment with willow trees
Cool.
that I'll cut down after maybe 10 years. But I want to see if a tree root is strong enough to break through some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And
Should be.
Well, I'll tell you in 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I work with, I've done some consulting over the years for a farmer who has a chestnut farm on a soil that had been tilled for like decades. It was a very well-established organic farm, and they just, they had organic farm, they tilled the soil really aggressively, and so he's using chestnut trees and then a variety of other deep-rooted perennial species with the chestnut trees to sort of rehabilitate that soil over time. Yeah. And really what you're trying to do is, like Laura was saying earlier, is just really accelerate the sort of the digestion cycle on your farm. So one of the reasons that hayfields, according to NRCS, do suffer from that loss of soil habitat is the combination of the equipment and the removal of the biomass over time. So Laura started out with very low organic matter soil and is trying to raise that, and partly the various strategies to do that are growing cover crops for biomass and then not removing it from the soil, but cutting it down, terminating it, and then planting through that residue to keep the soil covered as much of the year as possible. So you're adding that organic matter.
Great.
Yeah.
When you were talking about crimping the rye, the method that you described as two by fours with two people with a piece of wood with a sharp blade. Have you ever tried like using like a lightweight a roller to roll it?
I haven't. I think that might work too. You want it to be pretty heavy.
Yeah. I'm talking about one of the ones that like you can fill up with water and you can make
That might work.
that you can monitor the weight, that you're not compacting it, but you're doing the same effect without, a struggle.
Right. I don't have a tool right now, so we're going to make that 2x4 and try that because I've seen other farms use that. I think Gaining Ground was the one that was using that.
And you don't want to get under the root. You just want to get over the top.
We're just going to crimp this stalk so that it doesn't grow back. So.
From what I've heard, the roller won't be effective even with a heavy weight, because the crimping tool, even if it's really roughshod in its fabrication, what it's going to do that a roller won't is actually interrupt the xylem and phloem, where a roller won't. So it is actually damaging the plant to some extent, but it's not completely separating it like a mower might.
Right.
So it will stay put. But if you just roll it, it's just going to come right, a large portion of it's just going to spring right back up.
Yeah.
A question about breaking new ground, because it seems like you've done that twice, and maybe if anyone else has experience too, is there a no-till approach at that point, or is it really like, hey, this is the effort here, this event needs to be something different to get to a point where now we can do no-till?
When we opened this up, I didn't know about no-till, but it depends upon how large the space is that you're opening up. So we're doing a small area at our other field, which is probably 60 by 20. And we tarped it last year, covered it with shredded leaves. We had a little green stuff growing back, so we decided to put cardboard down, and then we covered with a couple inches of compost. And we're going to plant in there probably around mid-June. You could do things like that to open up ground instead of tilling. It just depends on how big and how much stuff you have to put down.
And have you used one of these on that 60 by 20 plot yet?
The penetrometer? No, we haven't.
Okay.
No. Cool. But it's next to a really sweet spot of ours, so we're thinking maybe it's also got, some good soil there. It feels good. I mean, it feels mushy when we're sort of walking through it right now. It feels soft. Yeah. But we didn't till it, which was, but something this big, covering the whole thing would be a lot of work. So, calling somebody who has a tractor and a plow to give us a go. I mean, they did that for us, and it was so easy. And then they planted the whole thing in a cover crop for us our first season. So, because they had all that equipment, so that made a big difference.
When you have a lot of rain like we had a few weeks ago, you get puddles in the aisles, and yet you could still probably plant up on the hill.
That's the beauty of raising the beds, and that's why we've always done it, because we've always had, this is the first year we were able to plant peas that we weren't standing in the mud. Very first year. And it's the very first year that we didn't have lakes in the walking paths this spring. So I think weather had something to do with that, and also I think the work that we've been doing on the soil had something to do with it. But it is really nice to have those beds raised when you get those types of rain events. You can see these beds haven't been raised in quite a while. We raised part of this field right there, I think last year or the year before, but these we haven't done in probably 4 years. So if we don't get further, flooding, maybe we won't raise them.
Notice that you've got a little slope this way and that way, so you've got the steeper slopes that way, so your beds are going this way, but you probably still get some runoff in that direction.
We do, yeah. But fortunately, we didn't have any erosion this year.
But it's good because it helps drain your field. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.